This is In the Loop. I'm Christian Bryant. For Lent, I'm strongly considering just giving up. Here's what we got for y'all. Tonight, with millions in the dark, what's truly behind power failures nationwide? We've got the facts. Plus, artificially intelligent weapons create some new opportunities and new human rights concerns. We've got a peek at a new documentary on this. But first, here's what you need to know right now. The winter weather still hasn't let up, and the problems are starting to pile up as much as the snow is. More than 100 million people nationwide live in areas covered Wednesday by some type of winter weather warning, watch, or advisory. We are now seeing rolling blackouts across multiple states. In Texas, millions of residents haven't had power since Monday. They're now stuck in below freezing temperatures.
We got all the blankets out. We tried to all sleep together to keep us warm, come to the cars to keep our phones charged, and then today when we got up, there was no water.
Houston, the nation's fourth largest city, is also dealing with water supply issues and the threat of contaminants. A boil water notice was issued there until further notice. Community advocates in San Antonio say many low-income communities were the first to be hit with power outages in parts of the state. That's especially troubling because low-income households lack financial resources to stay somewhere else or recover after the storm. Several studies also show that minority communities tend to live closer to industrial sites of pollution. According to the New York Times, when large refineries are forced to shut down and eventually restart, they release bursts of pollutants into the air, and many have already had to close this week. Several automakers, including Ford, Toyota, and General Motors, also shut down plants across the country due to outages and natural gas shortages. Grocery stores aren't doing too great either. H-E-B had to limit purchases of items like water. Meanwhile, a map of Walmart stores showed more than 300 locations were closed. Temperatures in much of Texas aren't expected to get above freezing until Friday. Throughout the whole pandemic, getting kids physically back into the classroom has been a priority, but how to make sure teachers are protected while doing that isn't exactly clear. According to the American Federation of Teachers, at least 530 educators from around the US have died so far due to the coronavirus. One of President Joe Biden's pledges for his first 100 days is to get the majority of schools back open. When asked about vaccinating teachers during a town hall, he said they should be moved up in priority.
I think that teachers and the folks who work in the school, the cafeteria workers and others, should be on the list of preferred to get a vaccination. But I can't tell the state you must move such and such a group of people up.
Vice President Kamala Harris echoed those thoughts during an NBC interview this morning. As of a week ago, Education Week's research showed at least 28 states, the District of Columbia, and Puerto Rico had made some or all teachers eligible to receive the coronavirus vaccine now. But it doesn't look like in-person learning will wait for all teachers to get vaccinated. Dr. Fauci said that's just not feasible over the coming months. Last week, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention released updated guidelines to get kids back in class, emphasizing social distancing and masks. Longtime talk radio host Rush Limbaugh died at the age of 70 today. His wife made the announcement on his radio show Wednesday. Limbaugh died of stage 4 lung cancer. He was diagnosed last January. Limbaugh has been credited with helping shape the modern Republican Party and revolutionizing conservative talk radio. He's been on air since 1988. In the decades since, he became a divisive figure over sometimes racist and misogynistic language, while also drawing millions of loyal listeners and wielding major influence. We're circling back to the main story of the day, the problems in Texas brought on by a winter storm. Politicians and people online have wasted no time in pointing fingers and placing blame for the massive power outages that are still affecting nearly 3 million customers. But it's not any one factor that created these problems in one of the country's largest states. Newsy's James Packard digs into the power grid vulnerabilities brought to light by the darkness.
As millions try desperately to survive the bitter cold.
Power's out, water's out.
Lawmakers and commentators are jumping at a chance to supercharge the debate over Texas power grid.
This shows how the Green New Deal would be a deadly deal for the United States of America. Our wind and our solar got shut down, and they were collectively more than 10% of our power grid.
The governor arguing that puts strain on the natural gas power supply.
To reduce it to a conversation about renewable energy at this point in time is is outrageous. In Texas, the push for deregulation is so great. There's no incentive at that point for people to do what it takes to be able to harden a system.
But Texas' grid meltdown is evidence the state's power supply, isolated from the rest of the country, is all around vulnerable in cold like this.
Our infrastructure is going to have to be hardened to be able to withstand these kinds of weather events.
Texas governor admits freezing natural gas pipelines are a huge part of the mess. The Texas Tribune estimates 80% of Texas winter power comes from natural gas. Nonetheless, wind turbines, accounting for a fraction of power production, froze too, leading to misleading commentary like this.
Unbeknownst to most people, the Green New Deal came to Texas. The power grid in the state became totally reliant on windmills.
It's not true. Only about 7% of most of Texas' winter power supply comes from wind.
I understand that many of the wind turbines were not heated, whereas in places that normally get cold, they put heaters in the blades, and so those turbines are able to work. I mean, that's really the bottom line. It's just lack of preparation for this extreme weather.
What role climate change plays in the crisis is unclear, but scientists say the atmosphere is destabilizing. That means more intense cold in the winter and blistering heat in the summer.
I'm sure there'll be time to look back and evaluate what better preparations, if better preparation should have been done, could have been made. But at this point in time, we're just focused on getting relief to the people in the state.
In Congress, lawmakers are already asking for answers. The House Energy Subcommittee is meeting Thursday on pathways to a clean energy future.
More extremes, whether it's heat waves or floods or wildfires or cold weather, it's coming, and we have to build an infrastructure that's ready for it.
A stage set just in time for Texas to make the point. Whatever the source, if the infrastructure can't withstand extremes, it can be life or death for Americans in the crosshairs.
I do not trust that they're in a place to say we're going to get it back up today, tomorrow. I believe it's going to take some time, and that's what I'm explaining to my residents.
James Packard, Newsy, Chicago.
Meanwhile, many Texans are using TikTok to show just how resilient they are. The greatest inspiration is born out of desperation, and I'm inspired as heck by ingenious Texans on TikTok right now. Here's what's trending. Millions are still without power across Texas, but that ain't stopping folks from getting a little creative with their food.
No power. We'll hook us up a little bonfire in our chimney.
But what about the food you're not using right away?
State of emergency. My ass. We're gonna make this work.
As a former Chicago resident, I can confirm that this is a tried and true way of keeping your refrigerated items nice and frosty during the wintertime. And homeboy with the Honda Odyssey was onto something right here. The power grid might be in trouble, but the rear power outlet on this minivan isn't. These TikToks are hilarious, but I can't overstate just how unfunny and dire the situation is for so many Texans. Despite all of that, social media has provided a rare window into how some people are making the best of the worst conditions. The folks at Disney must have said, you know what? Now's the time for an origin story about a woman who wants to kill and wear Dalmatian pups.
I'm Cruella.
We know who you are, lady. This live-action film gives us a backstory of Cruella de Vil before she went all DeVille wears Prada. Emma Stone takes the lead as a fashionable grifter who gets tied up with the wrong crowd in London's 1970s punk rock scene before she becomes Disney's Joker. I'm just messing. Folks online have been chatting about Stone getting the Joker treatment, with which a lot of people seem to be on board. The film is not yet rated, and you'll be able to watch it somewhere starting May 28th. Apple is releasing 217 new emojis on iOS 14.5, and they'll include another batch of inclusive representations for the folks who just haven't found the right emoji yet. Highlighted in the new release are couples with different skin tones and a person with a beard, which gives users a chance to specify the appropriate look even further. These emojis were approved by the Unicode Consortium back in September. After they do all that, it's up to individual companies to design how these emojis will look on their devices and platforms. The new options are coming at a time when Gen Zers have agreed that the laughing emoji, the most popular and most often used emoji, just isn't cool anymore. Millennials, I think we can find something else within this batch of 217. Like this one. This conveys laughter, right? No? Okay, Gen Z, we'll keep trying. Artificial intelligence can be a force for a lot of good in the world. Smart cars? Sure. Smart watch? Absolutely. Smart weapons, though? Let's talk about that. Our Newsy documentary series Shift looks at the under-the-radar stories shaping our future. And one of those is the introduction of AI into weapons and warfare. It's pretty fascinating stuff that raises a lot of ethical questions. Here's a clip from today's episode.
So the way we've built AI since the beginning is that we essentially create machinery that optimizes an objective, that comes up with the best possible way of achieving the objective, and then we feed the objective into it. We've known actually for thousands of years this is a really, really bad design. King Midas was functioning with that model in mind when he said, I want everything I touch to turn to gold. When you look at what's happened on social media, where we've got AI algorithms that are trying to optimize a fixed objective, which is click-through or revenue generation of some kind, we see that that's really messed up our world already, and those are pretty stupid algorithms. The Terminator series is fun to watch, and it's thought-provoking. In fact, the problem we have with autonomous weapons has nothing to do with them turning evil or turning conscious. It's just that what an autonomous weapon is a weapon that can kill people without individual human supervision of each attack on humans. If you don't have to have individual supervision, then you can do as much of it as you want. Simply by buying more hardware and launching weapons by the thousand or the million, you can cause damage on a scale that previously only nuclear weapons could achieve. Anonymous assassination services would become widespread, all the way up to attacks on the genocidal scale.
Nuclear is obsolete. Take out your entire enemy, virtually risk-free.
I thought then, yeah, this is what we need for autonomous weapons. We need a short film that illustrates why autonomous weapons are a bad idea. What life would be like if these weapons are developed and sold on a large scale. It used to be that if you wanted to kill millions of people, the only way you could do it would be to be a nation state. And for that reason, we have a whole system of international controls to keep nation states from doing that. And we try very hard to keep nuclear weapons out of the hands of anybody but a small number of nation states. So with autonomous weapons, that changes. ISIS, at some point, I believe, had a revenue of about $1 billion a month. So that buys 20 million autonomous weapons a month. So you would see the possibility that non-state actors, for the first time, could be wielding weapons of mass destruction against nation states.
The reporter on this week's episode of Shift and the executive producer of this show is Zach Toombs. He's here with us to talk to us about that clip. Zach, first and foremost, what does this tech look like on the battlefield? Is it, Boston Dynamics dogs? Is it drones? Is it guns? What does it look like on the battlefield?
Well, the short answer is all of the above. Today, most of the use of artificial intelligence in warfare is at most semi-autonomous, which means it has the capability to, find targets, but in all the cases that we know of, almost all the cases we know of, there is a person, there's a human being involved in making the decision about when and whether to pull the trigger. What this episode of Shift focuses on is how this technology is being developed today, and sure, some of its uses on the battlefield today, but some of the questions that it's raising about the warfare of tomorrow.
What exactly does that look like? Artificial intelligence in the future of warfare?
Wars of tomorrow fought by artificial intelligence would be faster, Advocates for this technology say that they would be more accurate and lead to less collateral damage, but human rights watchdogs, people who have raised a red flag about this technology being used in warfare, say it could actually lead to more death because you have these machines making decisions that do not involve human ethics.
Why are we talking about AI and the future of warfare now?
Well, we're having this conversation now because the future of warfare is being decided by governments right now, especially in international bodies like the United Nations, are going to shape warfare and how wars are fought over the coming century, over the coming decades. Even now, there are lobbying efforts at the United Nations to put regulations around the use of AI, artificial intelligence, in weapons. And so far, those lobbying efforts have not gotten very far because the major players in international diplomacy are the same countries that are often developing this technology. And human rights advocates are pushing for the same kinds of regulations and monitoring that we see for chemical weapons, for nuclear weapons, that those should be applied to artificially intelligent weapons as well.
Zach Toombs, I appreciate you, man. Thanks so much for joining us and talking to us about the latest episode of Shift. We appreciate you.
Thanks, Christian.
Stick around after the show to see the full episode of Shift and look out for new episodes each week wherever you stream Newsy. You'll be right back after the break. Criminal justice has become a bipartisan issue, and public support for the death penalty has dropped over the last 2 decades. At the same time, the number of people serving life sentences has actually increased, and 1 in 5 are Black men. Newsy's Jamal Andrews spoke to one man who was granted clemency from execution and from prison about his experience being incarcerated and what he hopes for others just like him.
We're going to kill you through incarceration. We're going to kill you by sucking the very life out of you. That's what life without the possibility of parole says.
As the inmate population has exploded in the U.S., so too has the number of people facing life imprisonment. According to a new study by the Sentencing Project, 1 in 7 U.S. prisoners is serving a life sentence or virtual life sentence, meaning more than 50 years. If you narrow that to Black inmates, the number jumps to 1 in 5. In total, about 203,000 Americans are set to die behind bars. In 1970, there were less than 200,000 people in America's entire prison system. Ronaldo Hudson has had a whirlwind of a life, experiencing the highest highs and the lowest lows the criminal justice system has to offer. Hudson was sentenced to death for a crime he fully admits to committing. He confessed to robbing, stabbing, and ultimately killing a neighbor in his apartment complex nearly 40 years ago. Hudson turned his life around after a stint in solitary confinement. He said all he had to listen to was a Walkman tape player.
On this tape, he was talking about who are you good for, or are you good for nothing? Can anybody trust you? If you were to die today, would anyone care?
After that point, Hudson got his GED, then a bachelor's degree in Christian studies. He severed ties with gangs in the prison and went on to create his own mentorship program called Building Blocks that boasts nearly 500 members.
My change wasn't predicated on me looking to be set free. It was completely motivated by me saying, I will not die, with the world saying he was the most deserving of death.
In 2003, with just 2 days left in office, former Illinois Governor George Ryan commuted the death sentences of all 160 inmates on death row to life without parole. Fast forward 17 years, the current governor, J.B. Pritzker, granted Hudson's clemency petition, making him a free man for the first time in nearly 4 decades.
When I walked outside of that prison, I breathed for the first time in 37 years.
As one of very few who has received not 1 but 2 governor's commutations from the most severe punishments America has to offer, Hudson says the 2 sentences aren't that different.
People don't like telling the truth about the death penalty, which they will say we will pay for the poison to actually kill you. Life without the possibility of parole says we're going to kill you and we'll just release you once you die.
While public support for the death penalty has steadily fallen over the past 25 years, 60% of Americans support life imprisonment as a preferred alternative. And the number of people serving life without parole has jumped 66% since 2003. But advocates and many experts say that harsh sentences like life imprisonment don't actually serve as a deterrent to crime. For Hudson's part, he says he is living proof no one is irredeemable.
So I can't even act like I don't understand how society fear us. But we're more than that. We're also your brothers and your cousins and your uncles and your fathers. And many of us have come to a place to say, hey, listen, I'm sorry that I wasn't a better person, but I have the potential to be better.
Jamal Andrus, Newsy, Chicago.
If you haven't done so already, feel free to reach out to us on Twitter using the hashtag NewsyInTheLoop. It's painless, unless tweeting causes you pain, and if so, you should probably see a doctor about that. Across the country, getting vaccines to people is a patchwork of federal, state, and local efforts. It can be confusing, and for some people desperately trying to get a shot, it can be overwhelming. Newsy's Lindsay Thies looks into some of the latest successes and challenges in mass vaccination efforts.
The goal, get as many eligible people as possible equal access to a vaccine. But supply is still low, and officials are pleading for patience.
We do ask the public again, if you don't see anything in the coming days, to keep trying.
The good. 2 new federal vaccine sites opened in California, aiming to distribute shots for up to 6,000 people a day, 7 days a week, for 8 weeks, all funded by the federal government. These are the test runs for the Biden administration's efforts to create 100 mass vaccination sites nationwide in 100 days.
The entire time we've been here today, it has really been a steady flow of cars. You can see behind me, they go through these lines, and then there's 3 different tents. Each tent has about 5 bays where some 100 vaccinators total are just standing by and waiting and getting those shots into arms.
The site is open to people in the Bay Area that include healthcare workers, people aged 65 and older, and essential workers in food and agriculture, emergency services, education, and childcare.
We have a lot of frontline workers, people who work in jobs where they have to physically go to work, whether they are bus drivers or cooks or nurses, and a lot of these people are worried they need access to vaccine.
Oakland Vice Mayor Rebecca Kaplan helps run the Oakland-Alameda County Coliseum Vaccination Task Force. She says without the feds' help, they'd only be able to vaccinate 1,000 people daily. The doses here are coming from a federal supply, extra to what the county was already getting. And federal officials are picking sites for locations that are easy to get to. Here, the public transit system is offering free train rides. Shuttles will transport people from their homes. By the end of the week, mobile vaccine units from FEMA will go into community sites too. The help is desperately needed. The bad. In the past weeks, sites like a city-run mass vaccination hub in downtown San Francisco shut down because of low supply. They are planning to reopen only for second doses this Friday. Winter storms are slowing vaccine shipments elsewhere in the country. Storms affecting vaccine distribution hubs in Kentucky and Tennessee have delayed vaccines to at least 13 states. In Colorado, more than 133,000 doses were expected to arrive Thursday. About 2,000 people in Miami-Dade County, Florida, won't get their second doses as scheduled. And feeling the impact the most, people hit the hardest by COVID, already getting vaccinated in far fewer numbers.
We've seen the greatest impacts in our communities where there's a lot of essential frontline workers, particularly communities of color, people living in very dense housing where there's, lots of family members or multiple families in a small space.
Until we can get a dependable, reliable supply of vaccine coming so that we can do proper planning, we're just going to still stumble like this.
The Biden administration announced Wednesday they're on track to have enough supply for 300 million Americans by the end of July. They're averaging 1.7 million shots per day, up from 1.1 million 4 weeks ago. Lindsay Thies, Newsy, California.
That's it for us, gang. As always, thanks for watching. We'll be back tomorrow for more In the Loop. Same time, same place. Our latest episode from Shift is coming your way right now.